Saw this today while scrolling Twitter. Brianna Joy Gray posting a clip of a new interview with Glenn Greenwald, and we'll watch the full interview, but this definitely got my attention because it's a quote from Glenn saying, "I probably would not have felt totally comfortable, to be honest, with the way the Twitter files was done. I'm not willing to be manipulated by the possibility that people are handpicking what they want me to see or don't want me to see." And again, that's in reference to the Twitter files and the way that the documents were distributed by Elon Musk to journalists like Matt Taibbi. And I was definitely a little bit surprised to see that because usually Glenn and Matt are pretty close and they, don't have much disagreement. And I was surprised to see Glenn Greenwald kind of calling out the journalistic integrity or lack thereof involved in the release of this information and of the Twitter files journalism in general. So again, I was definitely surprised to see that, and I'm excited to listen to this whole interview to get some more context.
Yeah, absolutely. I woke up this morning and I also saw a few of the clips. I don't think it was this one. The first one I saw, it was slightly different, but I was like, oh shit, Glenn was on bad faith. Press play. And in this conversation, I feel like I didn't finish the whole thing yet because I knew we were going to react to a lot of it on the show. But from what I did hear, it was a very interesting flow.
Yeah, definitely a very interesting conversation. I watched the first part of it, but I'm excited to break it down with you and get your opinion as well, Chat. Definitely an interesting conversation. And I've had mixed feelings about the whole Twitter files thing. At this point, I think it's definitely run its course. And now when I see Matt Taibbi dropping like Twitter files part 500, I'm just like, sigh, like yawn, who gives a shit? Let's move on. But like I said, I have mixed feelings because I do think that a lot of the stuff within the Twitter files was certainly worth reporting on. It was like, newsworthy to say the least. So you can't really blame the journalists in question for releasing the information. That being said, I do think it's a very valid criticism to say that the way the information was distributed by Elon Musk was a little bit sus. And the fact that it was selective, and then the fact that he himself, as Twitter's new owner, took the company in an even more censorious direction than what he was exposing via the journalism of Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, etc. And Barry Weiss, commented on that and called out Elon Musk for, embracing the same sort of censoriousness that she was helping him expose in the first place, but never saw anything like that from Matt Taibbi. He's been silent on the very censorious and authoritarian direction that Elon Musk has taken the company in. So, like I said, have some mixed feelings on the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, for what it's worth, we raked Matt Taibbi over the coals for that immediately as soon as it all went down. In fact, we've tirelessly done so because I think it's absolutely shameful. And it's like, oh, how are you going to pretend that you're like standing against the rich and powerful when you're literally, as Glenn put it right there, being handpicked to, spew the exact information that they want. It's not like you acquired a trove and they were giving you free reign to like look through everything. And even if that were true, it's like, why did they decide to give you that free reign? Shouldn't you be challenging that? Shouldn't you be talking about that in your reporting? Shouldn't you be saying it's possible there are other angles at play here? Of course, Elon's trying to detract from his own foibles and his own, censorious reign. That's not at all the tone that Matt Taibbi took at all. It was much more of an ass-kissing tone, a tremendously so, to the point that it's honestly, it was pretty shocking.
Right. So I guess, first of all, let me just say that the critique you're voicing is a much more reasonable one than I think was the dominant critique from media corporations. I think
for sure they just hated Matt Taibbi.
Yeah. Well, I'm not even sure it's so much they hated Matt Taibbi. Like I said, I think part of it is they're angry when independent journalists get stories. But I also think we have to remember that the censorship regime that this reporting was designed to expose is a regime that most of these media corporations support. In fact, they agitate for it. Their one critique of the big tech censorship regime is that they don't censor enough. That's the formal position of the Democratic Party as well. So I think they were angry that the target of this reporting was something that they support. Just like there was a lot of anger when we were doing the NSA reporting, because there are a lot of people in Washington who support what the NSA was doing. They were angry we were exposing something that they support. So I think it's very important to distinguish your reasonable critiques from what became the dominant critique from the media. That's the first thing. The second thing is, again, the critique that you're voicing, reasonable though it may be, is applicable to almost every single story that we ever hear about. Every single form of reporting that we hear about, your critique applies to. You know, the CIA goes to CNN. The Pentagon goes to the New York Times. They choose the reporters they know are going to report the story in the way that they want because they're choosing the reporters who are idealized.
And again, that's true. But that's also worthy of criticism. We criticize that kind of journalism, and so does Matt Taibbi. I think, Matt Taibbi is over and over and over and over again criticized that kind of reporting. In fact, there was a clip of him on Joe Rogan going around from about a year ago where he criticized exactly that sort of journalism. He says, when you start getting handed things, by powerful people and institutions as a reporter, you fucked up. When you start getting handed information, say, hey, you should release this. Not by Edward Snowden, obviously, not by some whistleblower, but by the powerful, by the establishment. When you're being handpicked as a reporter by the establishment, that's a problem. And, despite his anti-establishment branding, Elon Musk is quite literally the establishment. Like I said, he's the world's second richest man. This is not some dissident.
And he would be the world's richest man if he hadn't made such a just horrid financial decision in buying Twitter.
Absolutely correct.
Logically aligned with their agenda. This is a critique that applies to all journalism, not just the journalism in this specific case. So that's one thing. The other thing is the critique you're making is not really a critique of Matt Taibbi or the journalist. It's a critique of Elon Musk. Because,
100%.
Like in the Snowden story, Snowden gave me the archive, and I was free to do with it what I wanted. And so one of the things that I did, although not right away, we had, it was a very sensitive process. We opened it up to a lot of other newsrooms around the world, but that took a while. Same thing with the Brazilian reporting. Like I said, the first thing with that archive I did was I secured it in the United States so the Brazilian government couldn't get it. I reported the first set of stories myself, and only then did I start opening it up. The big difference, though, is that in those cases, or in the WikiLeaks cases, the people who possessed the archive and therefore could control what was done with it were the journalists themselves, myself or WikiLeaks or whomever. In this case, what we're talking about are the corporate files of Twitter. And so the idea that Elon Musk is going to dump the entire corporate files of Twitter onto the internet or just have like a free-for-all where every journalist gets to come in and pick and choose the parts they want, including institutions he doesn't trust, I just don't think is realistic. But let me just say, I agree. I agree with you. Or you could say, well, then why not bring in some leftists?
Why not you, Glenn? I was kind of expecting that you would be an obvious choice for someone in this position. Would you be interested?
The problem was, and of course, people talk to me who are in this process about doing it. I wasn't Elon's first choice. It was Matt. The problem is, in order to do it, everyone who did it had to fly to San Francisco. And just because of my husband's, health situation, I would never leave the country with David, and still in ICU and with my kids needing support. So for personal reasons, I wouldn't have done it. I probably would not have felt totally comfortable, to be honest, with the way in which it was done. In the sense that they were
Oh, I was just about to. Glenn is about to show you that this is a real I'm not trying to take another needless shot at Matt, but the way that Glenn take this massive journalistic opportunity and he's like, oh, I really would have hated how this makes me look, is basically what he's about to tell you. He's about to, this would probably make me look like a massive hypocrite, so I wouldn't do that, because Glenn is a stand-up guy with real intense morals. And you know what? I totally agree with him. And also, I can only imagine, I'll never have the temptation, but I can only imagine how tempting it would be to take a fucking another just slam dunk insane story like this. And for as much as Glenn downplaying it, like, oh, I wasn't, Elon's first choice. Well, neither was probably Barry Weiss. I think you could have starched her if you'd said, oh, yeah, no problem, I'll fly out to San Francisco. But, obviously he had to think about his family, which is also honorable.
Absolutely. And I do have to say, I'm a little bit, I feel like Glenn's being a little bit contradictory here, because earlier in this discussion, he was saying like, oh, he was kind of defending Matt Taibbi's role in the Twitter files and saying that, oh, well, this is how all journalism works. But now he's saying that I personally wouldn't have felt comfortable being a part of this because of the way it was rolled out. So let me know, Chad, and I'm interested in you as well, Zach, what you think the discrepancy there is, and whether or not you do think he's being a little bit contradictory.
Well, yeah, dude, I think the obvious thing is he doesn't want to slam Matt. He doesn't want to come out here and be like, yeah, he fucked up taking that story. Like, would I have taken that story? Obviously not. I think it looks bad if you've made the mountain of criticism that Matt and I and, you know, many others have made about this kind of thing. And in fact, going back to the Joe Rogan clip that you referenced that was going around Twitter of him being like, you know, this exact thing that I'm about to do is like horrible. It's like, yeah, you know, and you get it. You understand the temptation. Like, you know, Matt going off on Substack, being on his own, he wants to, you know, harpoon a big whale of a story for, you know, independent media, whatever he's told himself built up in his head. That's fine. It's just massively inconsistent with the criticisms he's made very recently. And I think that Glenn is juggling, you know, being a nice guy, not wanting to come after Matt, not wanting to, like, you know, stick a rusty shank in his back and be like, look, I'm so much better and more ethical than you. But while also on the other hand being like, if you're asking me point blank, would I have done this? Why didn't I do it? Well, these were some of my like legitimate concerns that held me back. So I think he's trying to do a balancing act right here to not come off as like directly like throwing Matt Taibbi under the bus, but while also making clear this is why I didn't get involved in that, because it would have been harder for me to make these kinds of criticisms.
Correct. And in case anyone's still confused, it's not the information that itself that was released, which is problematic. If Matt Taibbi had this information leaked to him by some low-level employee at Twitter, like what happened with Edward Snowden and Glenn Greenwald, that would be amazing. No one would have any issue with that. Everyone, I think, universally would agree that that's serious reporting. That's, you know, journalistic integrity. The problem is that Elon Musk himself, the current CEO of Twitter, and, you know, one of the world's most rich and powerful men, you know, personally selected these journalists in order to curate what he felt was important information to release about the previous regime at Twitter, before just, you know, a couple days later taking the same approach to running the website himself, the same censorious, authoritarian approach, banning his own critics, banning information that he didn't like. That was the problem, and that's why it came off like a PR stunt rather than a serious piece of reporting.
Especially because Matt wouldn't turn around and criticize him for that.
Right. That's what was really unfortunate, in my opinion. And he's still out here dropping more and more Twitter files, still silent about any sort of criticisms of Elon Musk. But yeah, let's go back a couple seconds and listen to what Glenn Greenwald says here, because this is the most interesting part of the interview.
Still in I
that you would be an obvious choice for someone in this position. Would you be interested?
The problem was, and of course, you know, people talk to me who are in this process about doing it. I wasn't Elon's first choice. It was Matt. The problem is, you know, in order to do it, everyone who did it had to fly to San Francisco. And just because of my husband's, you know, health situation, I would never leave the country with David, you know, and still in ICU and with my kids needing support. So for personal reasons, I wouldn't have done it. I probably would not have felt totally comfortable, to be honest, with the way in which it was done, in the sense that they were the guardians of the information, and the only information that you end up getting is information they decide to give you. And I'm not willing to kind of be manipulated by the possibility that people are handpicking what they want me to see or don't want me to see, because that can end up causing me or putting me in the position where I'm unwittingly serving as a spokesperson for an agenda that is not mine.
Glenn, isn't that kind of a big deal? Isn't that kind of a significant critique? And I think probably one of the only good faith critiques that's come down about everybody, including people whose journalism I respect so much, like Matt Taibbi, is that if you aren't able to have direct access to the primary documents, if you are, to your point, being served up some kind of sliver. I mean, I've seen Matt asked in like a call-in situation, what about censorship of the left? And he said, well, I just haven't seen very much of that. And maybe that's true. Maybe Twitter just had not that much interest in censoring the left. Fine. But when you are only getting a piece of the pie, it puts someone who is a good faith actor like Matt Taibbi in the position of making a representation. Like Twitter wasn't that focused on censoring the left, but he might not be able to realistically speak to truthfully because he only has a piece of the picture.
Right. All he can say is I didn't see it. And the reason he maybe didn't see it is because he wasn't shown it. So I guess, like, you know, again, first of all, let me just say that there were no real left-wing journalists brought in, although like a framework that doesn't count Matt Taibbi and Li Feng as
Freudian slip, LOL.
Yeah. So I just want to add that when Glenn laid out that criticism of why he wouldn't do it right there, go back and play our clip when we first talk about this. That is almost verbatim the exact criticism that we fillet Matt Taibbi for, because it's so fucking unacceptable to just allow yourself, especially after he's made all of these criticisms, for him to just kind of allow himself to be played like that, because that's the real problem. Is it's like, of course he hasn't seen any of the shit that was censorious of the left. Elon still wants to pretend that doesn't exist, and that the right wing and these like new thinkers and chin strokers and the intellectual dark web were the real victims. Okay, that's what he wants you to see. What else is there? You don't fucking know. You've just been an unironic useful idiot. Jesus Christ. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we watch some more of this, I did want to quickly play that clip that I mentioned earlier of Matt Taibbi on Joe Rogan.
Spoon-fed, right? And like, I think that's true with comics, with any kind of journalist. Like once you start getting, handed things, then you've lost. You know what I mean? They have you at that point, and you got to get out of that habit. It's like, or you can't cross that line.
You can't cross that line.
Spoon-fed, right? And
yeah,
damning.
Just so damning, considering where he would end up less than a year, or maybe a little over a year from this Joe Rogan appearance. And we're not trying to be too hard on Matt Taibbi. The guy's done some amazing work. One of the first things that Zach and I ever did on this channel was a book club where we read and analyzed Hate Inc., which I still think stands up as a phenomenal media critique. Matt Taibbi is definitely someone who I have a lot of respect for, and who has done undeniably amazing journalism over the years. I don't think it's fair to just straight up call him a right winger or a conservative. I mean, I think if you go policy by policy, he probably does support a lot of the same kind of policies that Zach and I support, and that the movement we're a part of support. So, some people do have an unnuanced opinion of Matt based on some of his cringier takes as of late, and some of his undeniable pandering to the right wing. And we don't want to just paint with a broad brush here and say that everyone we disagree with is a right winger or whatever. But I do think there's some very valid criticisms of his journalism as of late, and specifically the Twitter files. And I think the fact that someone like Glenn Greenwald, who's not only ideologically aligned with Matt Taibbi, but literally the guy's friend, I think that's pretty telling.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, I completely sign off on everything you said. I mean, we fangirled the fuck the one time that Matt Taibbi acknowledged that we existed, right? Like, we did. And it was like we were like tongue-in-cheek about it, and I think he was kind of making fun of us by reacting to us on the podcast, but then we were like so stoked that I think he felt bad about it a little bit. And anyway, I don't know if you've seen any of our
content. Think he was making fun of us, because he even put us in his Substack. Remember, where he spoke quite positively about us.
That's true. Maybe. Who knows? Anyway, long story short, what I was going to say was we were big fans of his work. I still am. I've read more than half a dozen of his books. And I would say that he's written some of the best short, observational pieces on American politics since the turn of the millennium. I mean, I swear to God, and here's the thing, if you read a piece like Bush Like Me, okay, this is a throwback, guys, because it was a Bush era commentary. But if you've never read that piece by Matt Taibbi, I legitimately think it's one of the pieces that stands out to me as like it changed the way I ever wanted to like write. And I don't do writing, but professionally, but it's massively inspirational. And I think that the way that he humanized those people that were the volunteers that were working on the Bush campaign, and how he really understood why they were able to kind of dupe themselves into thinking that Bush was one of them, like a working class Joe, in a sense that it also happened with Donald Trump. And I think a lot of times the parallels between those two things don't get discussed enough. Like the people who were primed and ready from the Bush era would to see an aristocrat as like a working class Joe. And I remember, one of the things that made sense to me about George Bush was when we were talking to Ty, and he was like, the one time I met him, he was like, "Hey champ," grabs him into whatever, and he's like, "Do you think you can take the old man?" Just really good at cosplaying as like a working class Joe. And he gets into the class politics of all of this, and like they're working poor people and they support George. really brilliant piece. A lot of amazing stuff from Matt Taibbi. Obviously, Griftopia, Great American Bubble Machine, all that stuff, legendary. And part of what's the thorn in my side about all this is I would just be fucking shitting my pants to get to read some of Matt Taibbi's commentary on like FTX and what's going on with Sam banking fraud and all those other fuckers. Because he would be so well informed and so honest and articulate and engaging and all these kinds of things, and instead he's just like, yeah, the fucking corporate powers that be did some shady shit, and I'm like, yeah, they did. They kept us from getting the information that they didn't want us to get, just like they're keeping you from getting the information that they don't want you to get. Like, do you see how this is like hard for me to care about?